The world of American politics is never short on irony, but sometimes the irony is so direct that it writes its own punchline. A recent incident involving the governor of California has quickly gone viral, not just for its symbolic value, but because it seems to neatly unravel the very narrative that has been publicly defended for years. It started as a seemingly lighthearted gesture. The governor was presented with a firearm, a California-compliant model, during an interview on a widely watched show. What followed has become a subject of intense scrutiny, ridicule, and political commentary. At the heart of this incident lies not just a firearm, but a long-standing debate over gun laws in California, which are among the strictest in the United States. For years, state leadership has taken a firm stance on gun control, championing layers of regulation that have often frustrated everyday citizens. But this time, it wasn't an ordinary citizen caught in the web of legal red tape. It was the very individual responsible for enforcing and advocating for those regulations. What was meant to be a friendly exchange turned into a public case study on the very complexity and rigidity of California's legal framework. And it hasn't gone unnoticed. To fully understand the implications of the firearm exchange and the events that followed, it's important to explore the political and legal backdrop that surrounds California's approach to gun control. The state has long been at the forefront of enacting comprehensive firearm regulations, with laws that address nearly every facet of gun ownership, from registration and background checks to transportation, storage, and magazine capacity restrictions. These laws have been justified by their supporters as necessary measures for public safety, especially in a state that has witnessed several high-profile mass shootings. At the same time, California's legal system has drawn criticism from Second Amendment advocates and constitutional scholars who argue that these regulations often overstep personal freedoms and are inconsistently applied. From what I've seen and heard over the years, even experienced gun owners often feel overwhelmed trying to make sense of California's rules. In fact, the state's legal code is so extensive that even legal professionals sometimes struggle to interpret its nuances without specialist knowledge. Against this backdrop, the governor has long portrayed himself as a firm supporter of gun reform. Public speeches, policy endorsements, and legislative actions have repeatedly reinforced his commitment to reducing firearm violence through what he describes as common-sense gun laws. That's what makes the recent incident particularly notable. It exposed a potential contradiction between principle and practice, between political rhetoric and personal experience. It also introduced a broader question that goes beyond partisanship. What happens when the complexity of law turns on those who create it? The moment that sparked widespread attention occurred during a casual yet widely circulated interview. In that setting, the governor was presented with a firearm, a .365 macro model that complied with California's firearm laws. The gift was extended as a token of mutual respect, seemingly lighthearted in tone, and received in good spirits by the governor himself. Cameras captured the exchange, with the governor holding the firearm, expressing appreciation, and even acknowledging his respect for the Second Amendment. While the tone of the moment was relaxed, a few remarks made during the segment raised eyebrows almost immediately. Among them was a joke implying that the firearm might cause issues at airport security, suggesting that the governor might take it with him on a flight back home. While that comment may have been delivered in jest, it opened the door to a serious question. Was the governor aware of the full legal implications of transporting a firearm into California under current state law? As the clip gained traction online, it was not only firearm enthusiasts who took notice, but also critics and lawmakers. The core issue was no longer the act of receiving the firearm itself, but what would happen next. Would the governor follow the exact legal process required to bring the firearm into California? Or would the complexity of the law present an obstacle? In the hours and days that followed, public discourse evolved quickly. For many observers, this was more than just a viral video. It was a test case in real time. The governor, who had helped shape many of California's strictest gun laws, now found himself in a position that mirrored what countless residents experience when they try to comply with those same laws. To me, what started as a lighthearted moment quickly turned into something bigger. A clear example of how intentions can run straight into the wall of overly complex laws. And just like that, the governor walked straight into his own legal trap. California's gun laws are some of the most detailed and restrictive in the country, They require careful navigation at nearly every step, especially when it comes to firearm transfers, interstate transport, and registration. For any Californian who receives a firearm as a gift, particularly from out of state, there are procedures to follow. These include background checks, the use of licensed firearm dealers, waiting periods, and in some cases, approval through the California Department of Justice. Under these rules, receiving a handgun from outside the state without using a licensed dealer is not just discouraged, it is illegal. Additionally, there are specific requirements concerning magazine size, safety features, and roster compliance, which collectively make the process highly technical. The laws are written with the intent of keeping firearms traceable and regulated, but they also introduce a significant administrative burden, even for those with lawful intentions. It's like you need a law degree just to follow the law. The situation involving the governor drew sharp attention because it raised the question of whether he had unintentionally violated the very laws he had long supported. A press release issued by a California Assembly member sarcastically highlighted the irony, noting that it would be unfortunate if the governor had broken one of his own laws. Though the tone was clearly intended to be provocative, the point was made. Even high-ranking officials could be ensnared by the same red tape faced by ordinary citizens. In response to the growing controversy, it was eventually revealed that legal counsel had to be hired to review the legality of accepting and transporting the firearm. The conclusion, according to several public sources, was that the firearm would remain in Tennessee. That decision was not based on disinterest, but rather on the sheer difficulty of complying with the layered legal requirements. In essence, the governor did not bring the firearm home, not because he could not, but because navigating his own law had become too complicated. The irony couldn't be more perfect. As public attention mounted, the incident shifted from social media chatter to formal political inquiry. A state assembly member took the unusual step of sending letters to both the Department of Justice and the California Attorney General. These communications included a series of pointed questions regarding the legality of the firearm gift, the governor's knowledge of the relevant laws, and whether proper procedures were followed. While partly satirical in tone, the letters were structured to prompt a real legal response from state authorities. The irony was not lost on political observers. The same legal apparatus that had been constructed to enforce the state's strict gun laws was now being asked to evaluate a potential infraction by the very individual most associated with those laws. This created an awkward, if not absurd, situation. Legal experts and political analysts alike began dissecting the matter not just for its factual implications, but for its symbolic weight. According to later statements from individuals close to the situation, the governor's legal team determined that navigating California's firearm transfer laws would be excessively burdensome. It was not just a matter of formality, but one of procedural overwhelm. Rather than risk a misstep or create further controversy, the decision was made to leave the firearm behind in Tennessee. Although no formal charges or official investigations were pursued, the message was clear. Even those in power could find themselves entangled in the systems they helped build. From where I stand, the story didn't make a loud exit, but the message it left behind was loud enough for anyone paying attention. What makes this event resonate beyond the headlines is what it reveals about life under California's firearm regulations for the average citizen. If the governor of the state, backed by legal advisors and a full team of staff, found the laws too complicated to comply with, what does that say for everyday residents? Those without legal expertise or political resources often find themselves overwhelmed when attempting to navigate the same bureaucratic channels. In California, residents are subject to an extensive framework of gun control measures that include registration requirements, mandatory waiting periods, limits on the types of firearms that can be sold, and restrictions on where and how they can be carried. While advocates argue that these laws are essential for public safety, critics suggest they disproportionately impact law-abiding citizens who simply want to exercise their constitutional rights. To me, this incident hits squarely on the issue of public trust, especially when the people writing the laws can't navigate them either. Many people view the law as something that should apply equally to all, regardless of office or influence. When someone in power encounters the same difficulties as a private citizen, it can be seen as a validation of those frustrations, but also as a reminder that the burden is often ignored or underestimated in public discourse. The situation served as a rare moment of clarity. It exposed the often invisible barriers created by well-meaning but overly complex regulation. And while it may not lead to immediate change, it has undoubtedly become a talking point in the ongoing conversation about how best to balance safety, rights, and practicality in modern lawmaking. In the end, what began as a spontaneous exchange during a casual interview evolved into a revealing episode about the nature of governance, law, and accountability. The governor did not end up with the firearm, not because it was outright illegal, but because the effort to ensure compliance with his own state's laws proved too confusing and onerous to justify. That in itself tells a larger story. I can't help but see this whole situation as a metaphor for something bigger. When the people who write the laws get trapped by them, maybe it's time for a serious rethink. Regulations that are meant to promote safety must also remain accessible, consistent, and fair. Otherwise, they risk alienating the very people they are supposed to serve. This moment will likely fade from the headlines, but the irony it exposed will remain in the minds of many. It was, perhaps unintentionally, a demonstration of how tangled modern governance can become when principles collide with practice.